You these before, but it goes with this lesson, the 12 tribes in Canaan. You'll find on here the little tribe of Benjamin. Look near Bethlehem. You can see that it's near that area. And that shows you the tribal division of Benjamin. You can see when he talks about it being, yours isn't, it's black and white if you're looking for it.
It's in the back.
And you can see that it, of course, was much smaller than many of the other ones. So just to give you an idea on that. All right, so it came to pass that, let me turn over to 9. That's a much better place to start. So there was a man in Benjamin whose name was Kish, and then it begins to tell about his background. Marianne read all those, so I just won't read them all again. Just giving you the background, a mighty man of power. So that's just letting you know that there was wealth and influence. The word that's used in the King James is valor, not meaning necessarily bravery, but meaning there was influence in the community. So Saul is going to come from a family that has seems to have a great deal of power and influence in the community. His father's name is Kish, and he had a choice and handsome son whose name was Saul. Saul just means, the name Saul means asked of God. And so it's just interesting because, of course, the people, asked God for a king. And so it's just interesting that Saul's name is asked of God. And he is obviously got some things about him that everybody notices. What are they?
Tall, handsome.
Tall, dark, and handsome, huh? Really beautiful. Does it say anything to you here about the character of Saul?
No.
Does it say anything to you about the righteousness of Saul? No. How about his relationship with the Lord?
No.
What does it say? Oh, he looks good.
Yep.
He looks good. And that seems to be enough for the people. That seems to be enough for the people. There are a lot of men in this world that should have learned that lesson before they married the women they married, which is you want to look further than how they look on the outside, right?
My youth pastor say, don't marry a woman who looks good. Marry a woman who will wear well.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. And so he's a choice and handsome son. There was not one more handsome than he among the children of Israel. So when God chose the man for them, he gave them the best looking one out there.
Just what they wanted.
Just what they wanted. And it's enough for them. That's the part I really want to hone in on and have you remember. It was enough for them that he came from a family of influence and wealth, and he was handsome and more handsome than anyone else. And from the shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the other people. That just means he was head and shoulders above. So these people that were all of average height, here you've got this guy on top of everything else. He really is tall, dark, and handsome. 3, so the donkeys of Kish, that was Saul's father, were lost. Donkeys were a sign of wealth during that time, and so it was very important that you keep track of them. And so Kish says to his son, hey, go take one of the servants with you and arise and go and look for the donkeys. So he sends his son out to look for the donkeys. Now, keep in mind, this is God's plans and purposes. So as all of these events happen, in the back of your mind, remember, nothing is done that's a circumstance. Everything, the simplest of details, God has planned. I mean, obviously these donkeys needed to be lost, and the father needed to send Saul after them, and they needed to not be found until he got to a very certain place. And so everything that you're going to see, keep in mind, God is setting this in motion in order to give the people what they want. So while it may not be God's directive will, in other words, what he chose for his people originally, it is in his permissive will. He's allowing this to happen. He's actually facilitating the happening of this, although it is not the original plan that he had for them. For one thing, we didn't discuss it, but back in Genesis, when God divides up the tribes of Israel, where were the kings to come from? Judah. No, Levi had the priests. They were to come from Judah. And so where does Saul come from? Benjamin. So right there, you recognize that this was not...
That's the farthest away she can get.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just interesting to see that God is facilitating this, even though it is not the directive will of what he wants. Why? Because the children of Israel need to learn a lesson. There is a lesson here that needs to be learned before David steps into his position. So he goes and he looks for the donkeys. I'm in verse 4, and he passes through the mountains of Ephraim, and he passes through the land of Shalisha, and they didn't find him. And he passed through the land of Shalim, and they were not there. And he passed through the land of the Benjaminites, but they were not there. So when they came to the land of Zuph, Saul asked his servant who was with him, "Come, let us return, and lest my father cease caring about the donkeys and become worried about us." So they give up, basically, is what Saul wants to give up and go back home. And he said to him, "Look now, there is a man in this city, a man of God, and he's an honorable man, and all that he says will surely come to pass. So let us go there. Perhaps he can show us the way that we should go." Okay, this verse is going to tell us a couple of things. First of all, what does it tell you about Samuel?
He's honorable. Yes. He's got good reputation.
Okay,
He prophesies.
He's a good reputation. He prophesies, and he has become widely known. Right? Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that this is Samuel. This is the city where Samuel is at. This is the city where Samuel lives. And what does it tell you about Saul and his little servant?
Well, the servant has more going on.
Okay.
Right. The sense of being making a smart choice than Saul did. So.
Okay. It doesn't tell you a lot about Saul, but it also tells you that they want to go to this prophet of the Lord, who they know prophesies and comes true, and ask him what?
Where are our donkeys?
Where are our donkeys? So they're not asking, okay, what does the Lord have for us? What is the plans and the purposes of the Lord in our lives? What do we need to repent of? You know, all of these things that Samuel has a direct ability to teach them and feed into them. Instead, they want to go to Samuel and say, "Oh, where are our donkeys?" I mean, it is really kind of funny when you stop and think about it, isn't it? But again, God has a plan and a purpose for that.
But there are two. The servant knew more about God.
Yes.
And God's plan than...
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's just kind of very telling here that they want to know the way to go to look for their donkeys. And so in 7, now is where we're going to get to what Randy was talking about. Saul said to his servant, "But look, if we go, what shall we bring the man? So we have no bread in our vessels, it's all gone, and there's no present to bring to the man of God. What do we have?" I've read some commentary where they talk about the fact that, this shows that Samuel was prophesying for profit. And they like to paint it in a really negative way that, this is how he earned his money. And so this is how people go bad. And there's that whole thing that's out there. Obviously, we know that that's not what's going on here. Over and over again, you see in the Old Testament that any time that there is a man of God, there are things given to him, from food to shelter to clothing to money to all of that. And what is it given for? Is it so that that person will prophesy what you want to hear? We read in Ezekiel that that's what was happening with the false prophets, that they were doing that for money. But what do the true prophets of God? Why are they given gifts?
They're honored that way.
There you go. It's honored. It's honoring them with a token of some sort of esteem, much in the way that God had the people honor the Levites.
Well, I'm thinking of Abraham and what was that guy, the funny guy from Jerusalem?
Melchizedek?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, he brings him the wine and the bread out to give as an offering. But it was always just a way of showing homage, of honoring for what they're doing. It certainly is not getting them to pay them. In this particular case, it's money, but it wasn't always money in the Old Testament, what they brought to them. So he said, well, all of our bread's gone. We don't really have anything. And here's where the servant looks pretty good. He says, the servant answered Saul again and said, "Here I have 1/4 of a shekel of silver." They said that's about 1/10 of an ounce. "I will see that the man of God, I will give that to the man of God so that he will tell us our way. 9. Formerly in Israel, when a man who went to inquire of God, he spoke thus, Come, let us go to the seer, for he who is now called a prophet was formerly called a seer. So here's a really good indicator of this is being written after the fact of these stories going on, because before Samuel came along, they were seers. After Samuel, they were called prophets, and this is just that change is being made here, and this was written after that time.
There's,
Mhm.
sorry, a distinction today even. Seers see visions and hear prophecies. Prophets just hear, don't see.
I see. I see. That was kind of funny. Yeah. So they're in this particular case, they're the same. In this case here, they're just changing the name so that people will recognize that he who was called a seer is now a prophet. Okay.
Okay, so the seers were before prophets?
Yes. So they were called seers originally, and now they're being called prophets.
They were all prophets, but they were called seers first, and then they were called prophets.
Yes. And this is just letting you know there's a change in title, but not a change in what they're doing, the position.
Okay.
All right, in 10, Saul says to his servant, Well said, come, let us go. So they went to the city where the man of God was. This would be Ramah. We're going to see as we move along a little bit why we think it is Ramah. But he went up to the hill to the city, and there they met some young women going out to draw water, and said to them, Is the seer here? And they answered and said, Yes, he is, just ahead of you. Hurry now, for today he came to the city, because there's a sacrifice of the people today on the high place. So they get there, they find some young women, they want to know, where is this man of God? So what do they call him? A seer, but he is a prophet. And they said, he's just ahead of you, because they're going to be giving a sacrifice, and who would be there in the case of the sacrifice? Samuel would be there, and so it would be reasonable. Now remember, they're doing this outside of the tabernacle area now, and so they're going up to the high places where these type of things would normally be done. As soon as you come into the city, you will surely find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. That's in case you've forgotten. Oftentimes they had the friendship peace offerings that would be given at the end of the sacrifice, and everyone would participate. The fellowship offerings, everyone would participate in that. So the priest would, and the people who were there would be participating in a feast amongst themselves of these type of things, and so that would not be an unusual thing. So he's going to eat. For the people will not eat until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. Afterwards, those who are invited will eat. Now, therefore, go up, for about this time you will find him. So they went up to the city, and as they were coming into the city, there was Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. Now, Samuel and Saul don't know each other. Okay? They don't recognize each other facially because they don't know each other. Here's a really fascinating verse. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear the day before Saul came. In the Hebrew, it literally says, uncovered Samuel's ear. So he just speaks into his ear. An audible voice? Not necessarily. He uncovers the ear, meaning he lets him know what he needs to say. And this happened the day before Saul came. And this is what the Lord said. Verse 16. Tomorrow about this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. God orchestrates it all. And you shall anoint him commander. In the Hebrew, the word is prince. But remember what the people wanted. Someone to lead them into battle. And so in this particular case, commander is probably a good choice for this. Over my people Israel, that he may save my people from the hand of the Philistines. Mm-hmm. Isn't that what the people wanted? Mm-hmm. And what did it say earlier that God had already done with the Philistines all the days of Samuel? He had stayed the hand of the Philistines. So he was already accomplishing that. Mm-hmm. But they want another commander that is going to save them from the hand of the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people because their cry has come to me. So when Samuel saw Saul. That is hard, Mom.
Yeah.
The Lord said to him, there he is, the man of whom I spoke to you. This is the one who shall reign over my people. And so he's giving him the authority right there at that point. And Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, please tell me, where is the seer's house? So this is the first time Saul and Samuel are going to meet. Samuel answered Saul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for you shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let you go and will tell you all that is in your heart. So he introduces himself and immediately says, go up to the high place. You're going to eat with me today. That's quite an honor that's being bestowed upon a man that he just met. And remember, Saul has no idea why he's being honored. Saul is being kind of hit with something that he really isn't prepared for. And he says, tomorrow I'll tell you all that is within your heart. But as for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, don't be anxious for them, for they have been found. So, of course, that seems to be the most important. Yeah, that seems to be the most important thing. But what does that also do besides answer where the donkeys are? What does it also do?
Yeah.
Confirms him as a prophet.
Exactly. It confirms him as a seer or a prophet because he knows before Saul says a word exactly what Saul is concerned about. And he's letting him know, oh yeah, the donkeys are fine. Don't worry about it. And then he goes on to the more important part of this, which he says, and on whom is all of the desire of Israel? Question. And on whom is all the desire of Israel? Is it not on you and on all your father's house? So what was the desire of Israel?
A king.
A king. And so whether Saul knows that right there at this point, in detail of what it is that Saul is telling him is unclear. He recognizes that something is being bestowed upon him because of the way that he answers it. But when he is called the desire of Israel, that's a pretty big thing to throw on him. And Saul answered and said, am I not a Benjamite of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all of the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you speak to me this way? Is that really true?
No.
Okay, Benjamin was a small tribe, no doubt about it. But we just read earlier, was Saul's family the least of all of the tribes?
No.
So why would Saul answer this way? Was it just perhaps
A sign
humble.
of humility.
Okay.
Humble.
So he's kind of coming across in a non-bragging, humble way. I mean, it really shows Saul in a good light that he would answer it that way.
Maybe. But later on we find out he's the coward.
Exactly. Exactly. Or you have another option.
Well, later he's hiding. So
Right.
I think he just
Or
wants to find the donkeys and go home.
Is he
putting on
not
the airs.
stepping up to whatever it is you have in mind for me? Oh, I'm certainly not worthy of that. And simply finding a way to back out of whatever it is that Samuel has for him. We recognize that there are some good things that are going to happen to Saul at the very beginning here. He's not all bad. He's got some good qualities to him. God gives him every advantage to become the man that he should be to lead the people of Israel. We're going to find out he gets every advantage handed to him. He just simply fails in all areas of those advantages. So let's go on and see where what he does. 23 and I went too far. 22. And Samuel took Saul and his servant, and he brought them into the hall, and he had them sit in the place of honor among those who were invited, and there were about 30 persons. And so this is up at the high place where they're eating the meal, and there seem to be about 30 persons, and so Saul and even his servant are given these great places of honor. And Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion which I gave you, of which I said to you, set it apart. So previous to Saul coming, Samuel had already set aside the choice portion. We read about Exodus chapter 29, when we remember that there was a section of the sacrifice that was simply for the priest. and it was to be the thigh and the portion that's attached to it. You can read about it in Leviticus chapter 7 too. It talks about that portion that was to be set aside always for the priest. Evidently, this is the portion that Samuel had gone up to earlier and said, remember that portion I told you to set aside? This is bring that out for him. So the cook took up the thigh with its upper part and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, here it is, what was kept back. It was set apart for you. Can you imagine what's running through his head? I mean, is he thinking, am I going to take Samuel's place? What's going on here? He's being honored at a feast, at a sacrifice by the man of God with the priest's portion. He's a Benjaminite. He's not entitled to that portion of it. And yet Samuel is honoring him in this amazing way. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. Verse 25. When they had come down from the high place into the city, Samuel spoke with Saul on the top of the house. Very usual for the houses of Israel to have that flat area up at the top where the night breeze could blow and cool down the house that would get very warm. It's where traditionally you would roll out your mats, where you would bathe. That got Bathsheba into a lot of problems, but it's where you would have this open area up there where a lot of the living would take place. So they would go to the top of the house and eat and likely sleep. They arose early, and it was about the dawning of the day that Samuel called to Saul on the top of the house, saying, get up, that I may send you on your way. And Saul arose, and both of them went outside, he and Samuel. And as they were going down to the outskirts of the city, so Samuel was sending him on his way, Samuel says to Saul, tell the servant to go ahead of us. So he wants a private moment with Saul, and he went on and he said, but you stay here a while, that I may announce to you the word of God. So all of this time they've been talking, and the overnight stay, and all of that, it appears that Saul does not yet know what it is that God has in mind for him. And so I try and picture myself thinking what Saul must have been thinking as Samuel is talking to him, what they're talking about, what it is that Samuel is preparing for him. And he wants that time privately with Saul. Send your servant on ahead. And then you think about the servant, and he's probably like, I'd really like to stay here and hear what's going on. He has been part of all of this, but he wants to talk to him. So we're going to go right into chapter 10 because this story doesn't take a break. It goes directly into chapter 10. So let's pick up there. Reading